Score North and ScoreNorth.com. Purple Daily, presented by Surly Brewing Company.
At the end of the day, I want to be a Hall of Famer. So in order to reach that position, there's so much more that I have to accomplish, so much more that I have to, set for myself to better myself and really to learn. And I just can't wait to really just see how far I can really go. This is just the start of my career. And this is just so much more I have to learn, so much more I have to, do for myself to really get on that platform of being a Hall of Famer.
He said Hall of Famer. I thought he was going to say there's just so much I need to accomplish in my career to get on Judd's top 25 Vikings of all time list.
Oh, wow.
I just need to keep working, putting in the work, keep putting up the numbers, and then maybe someday I can climb above Matt Burke and Anthony Carter on Judd's top 25 Vikings of all time list.
When he's done playing, who knows? Sky's the limit for that young man. He's a likable guy. I like him.
He's pretty awesome. He's pretty good at football, too.
Mm-hmm.
This is Purple Daily, where we talk about the Vikings every single day, and we just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die. And when we say every day, this is a 365-day-a-year show, even during the offseason. No days off for Purple Daily, presented by our friends at Surly Brewing Company and TCL. No matter what you watch, TCL has award-winning TVs for any budget, any space, all with stunning picture quality. And TCL makes more than just TVs. They offer mobile products, audio devices, home appliances. TCL bringing you joy and simplicity through innovative technology. All week long, we've been counting down Judd's top 25 Vikings of all time. We have made it to the top 5. Do we have a list we can pop up for the YouTube audience here?
Yes.
Of 6 through 25. So we can go through, review. There's been a lot of pushback. A lot of people have disagreed with some of the names on this list. I think 21 through 25 is probably the most up for debate because there's just a lot of guys that could make an argument to be on this list. But, Judd, how do you feel so far going from 25 down to 6? Do you have any regrets to this point?
You know what? I do have one regret, and we could certainly have an entire episode on this next week at some point. I wish I found a way, and maybe it would have been, in retrospect to the price of Matt Burke, to get Steve Jordan on this list, the tight end. Some people have pointed him out, and you know what? He was a really damn good player. Other than that, though, I think once you get to, once you get to about 20 or so, this is a great list. Like, you could debate it, and you can switch guys around, and there are certainly some guys who were left off beyond Steve Jordan that we can talk about. But I mean, this is a franchise that just had so many great players. In my opinion, it's sort of hard to go wrong.
Yeah.
And
speaking of Steve Jordan, we will definitely dive into the snubs on an episode early next week. I've got a list. I've already been crafting a list of guys that are just gnashing their teeth, upset that they're not showing up here.
Yeah.
But we'll just, for the audio audience too here, I'll just fly through the top, 25 through 6. Scott Studwell, Steve Hutchinson, Matt Burke, Antoine Winfield, Anthony Carter are 21 through 25. Gary Zimmerman, Kevin Williams, Matt Blair, Robert Smith, Jared Allen, Joey Browner, Chuck Foreman, Jim Marshall, Mick Tinglehoff, Chris Dolman gets us to the top 10, which is Ron Yeri at 10, Paul Krause at 9, Adrian Peterson, Chris Carter, and Carl Eller. Somebody asked via the Score North app, they sent us some feedback, and they asked, would Jim Marshall have been more of a Hall of Fame consideration and maybe higher on this list if the number one highlight in his 20-year career wasn't him running the wrong way against the San Francisco 49ers?
No. I mean, it's not bad. It's funny now, but no, I think he is the poster child for your debate, Phil, that you have brought up, and I think tied into Santana ton, which is this: longevity or peak excellence. And Jim Marshall was damn good, don't get me wrong, but I think his calling card is the consecutive game streak, which was the longest forever for a long time. But like when you look at Eller and Page, right? Like those two are Hall of Fame, just dominant players. And Jim Marshall was really damn good, but he's more known for playing for a long time. And so, no, I don't think that the mistake at Kezar Stadium against San Francisco is why he's down on this list. I think it's two things. One is he is, I believe, seen as the third best guy on a defensive line that was absolutely dominant. And two, and this affects, and we talked about this before, every one of these guys, lack of a Super Bowl ring. If Jim Marshall had a Super Bowl ring, do I think that he would be in the Hall of Fame today? Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's, to me, the deciding factor.
I agree with that. Yeah, a lot of those guys would just be more elevated in the hallways of NFL history if the Vikings had not lost 4 Super Bowls in the 70s. So, all right, let's get to it. Unless you guys have any other final thoughts here leading into the top 5 that we need to be aware of, let's get into the top 5 Vikings of all time, according to Judd.
Jax, you got anything before I start?
No. I think most of your list has been fine. Outside of a quarterback snub in my lifetime, I've made that clear, and we'll talk about it in future episodes.
Oh, yeah. No, the quarterback thing to me is extreme, because there's a quarterback I left off who I feel the same way about him that you do about Dante.
Yep.
But I couldn't justify it. I like this guy, and I tweet with him, but I couldn't put him on this list.
There's another quarterback that I think is different than the ones you're talking about that I would have put on this list.
I know.
And we can talk about that as well early.
I know
next
there
week.
is, and you know what? He's on a great quarterback list of the Vikings, but not a top 25 list. Anyway, all right, number 5. And by the way, I consider these 5. I consider in some way, shape, or form, maybe small, maybe huge, to be people that help change the game. So not just like
the
great
NFL?
Vikings, like how we perceive the game today by what they brought. And they might not have been the only one, but they certainly played a role. So the next 5 names I consider to be almost a religious Viking experience.
That's awfully high praise for Chris Hovan. I mean, Chris Hovan was a very good player.
Bye, Minnesota. See you, Minnesota. That was the great when he left, and he's like, bye, Minnesota. He and Tracy Claeys. All right.
Tracy Claeys.
Number 5 on my list. And again, every one of the top 10, except for Adrian Peterson, who's not eligible yet, is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame and deserves it big time. Number 5 on my list is a guy with potentially the ugliest offensive line stance you will ever see. He was assured it wouldn't work, and it worked so well that he went to 12 consecutive Pro Bowls. And I'm not a Pro Bowl guy, but 12 consecutive is ridiculous. Hall of Famer, offensive guard, Randall McDaniel.
Yeah. Yep. It's so hard with guards too, because it's like, there's no statistics. You only really notice them in a game if there's a holding penalty or something. No one's really watching for pancake blocks, but it's one of those jobs that you just take for granted. It's probably kind of a boring job sometimes too. You're just or I don't know if boring's the right word.
It's thankless.
It's thankless. It's grunt work. It's taxing on your body.
Yep.
And he was just a hulking presence for over 10 years with the Vikings. And now, especially, you look at some of the offensive linemen on this list. Like they had Randall McDaniel for 10 years, and then they had Ron Yeri for 13 years, and Mick Tinglehoff, and now it's like, my God, every year we're trying to find a right guard around here. Can we get some longevity? Brian O'Neill is the closest thing we've had to longevity in the last 10 years, it seems like. So yeah, I think we almost took Randall McDaniel for granted and said, oh yeah, we'll just maybe not a Hall of Famer, but we'll go find another right guard and he'll be a staple for 10 years. That's not how it works.
And that stance with the leg like down, like it's the weirdest stance you'll ever see. Yeah. And that guy was so damn good. So what's
the story with that? How did he get sort of the homemade batting stance, if you will?
Mike Morris told us a story. What was it? That he had come up with something, or that he was struggling, and he found that to be the potential workaround, and he was told, of course, by his coaches, oh, that's not going to work. Yeah, dude, you can't do that. And he's like, no, it works for me. And they're like, it's not going to work. And then it worked really well. But yeah, it's the weirdest thing because his leg was like halfway down on the ground. It just looked really weird, but my God, he was good. And you know what? He's probably part of the line of guards who changed, or at least began to change, the perception of guards. Because, I mean, he was that good. So anyway, he's number 5.
All right. The legendary. He was a neck roll guy too, wasn't he? Pretty sure he had a neck roll.
Was he a neck roll guy? I don't remember that one.
I believe
but it's entirely possible.
Let me just look it up real quick here, just to confirm that I'm not spreading rumors about the neck roll usage of Randall McDaniel. Yeah. Or maybe he just had the big, bulky shoulder pads because he was
he definitely did.
320 pounds or whatever. Okay, no, he did have a neck roll in a couple of these.
Love it.
Yeah, can't jam his neck backward.
Love the neck roll.
All right, number 4.
Number 4 on the list, top 25 Vikings of all time, according to Judd Zolgad, a man whose name means he was born angry. John Randle, Hall of Famer, and make no mistake, undersized as could be, undrafted, defensive tackle, who I think there is no doubt about it, is in line now with the guys who brought about the thought process of, defensive tackles can be small? Because he wasn't going to work. He's too small. He can get after the quarterback from inside, which means it's immediate pressure, not coming from the edge. That works really well. John Randall helped, I really believe, change defenses to get us to the modern day defense where 3 techniques are consistently getting after quarterbacks and causing havoc. And look, they can do a lot of things, but before a guy like that, I think we really thought of them as run stuffers. They'd get some push. John Randall was a maniac on the field, and he is number 4 on the list.
How about the fact that he was undrafted too?
Texas A&I, right?
Crazy. Texas A&M Kingsville is the college that he's listed as going to, and is that why because he played at a small college and he just wasn't?
Yeah.
It was the late '80s and guys just weren't popping up on the radar. But by his second year with the Vikings, and he was an old, he was like a late 22 when he was drafted. And by his second year, he became a starter for half the games and had 9.5 sacks at the age of 24, and there was no looking back. And from that point forward, it was Pro Bowls, it was All-Pro. He was an All-Pro for 6 consecutive years between 1993 and 1998. And it culminated in 1997 with a 15.5 sack season that led the NFL from the interior.
Yeah, it was nuts.
Kind of a 90s version of Aaron Donald. Like, not as big as Aaron Donald. I don't want to compare them size-wise. But, yeah, getting the pressure on the interior, can also slide to the outside. And undrafted is the biggest part. We talk about the most successful undrafted players in NFL history. He's got to be on the cliche Mount Rushmore. Tony Romo was undrafted, but John Randall might be the most successful undrafted player in the history of the NFL, from undrafted to Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Incredible.
Playing a position that for his size, he never should have been left at. Like, ordinarily, you'd be like, okay, that guy's an end potentially, or weak. Like, they put him in a spot which appeared destined to fail, and the guy became a Hall of Fame player.
Yeah, and just like the iconic personality, right? The face, the Ultimate Warrior, eye black down the cheeks. And
he would study the opposing team's media guide to basically torment the opposing players.
Yeah.
He'd memorize stuff about, like, their families and then bring it up on the field.
He was one of the great players of his era. He was one of the great trash talkers of his era. He was one of the great characters with the face paint and the personality. And, we've spent a lot of time throughout these rankings looking at the guys from the 70s, the 60s, 70s, into the early 80s and say, man, if only Carl Eller or Jim Marshall or Ron Yeri, if they could have just gotten one Super Bowl ring, what would the thought have been about them? And the same applies to John Randall. I think he does get his due credit. Obviously, he went to the Hall of Fame, but if they cash in 1998 and he's the best defensive player on one of the best teams in NFL history, it just puts you on a different level. It just,
no question.
I think Vikings fans appreciate him for who he is, but I think he's even then more like Michael Strahan is only viewed in the way that he is because they won the Super Bowl in 2007, right? Like his personality and stuff, but winning the Super Bowl and all the media and attention that goes with it.
Yep.
I guess I'm curious to see what John Randall's life and career would have looked like if they had won the Super Bowl in 1998. Is it a stretch to say that it would have been different? That maybe he would have gotten national media opportunities? That he likes to golf and smoke cigars and play poker and stuff. So I don't know.
I don't know about that. But I mean, just think, if they had seen that thing through, beat the Falcons and beat the Broncos, just think about the different trajectory, about the feeling of this entire franchise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like the pain, not to say that there wouldn't be pain, but I think if you got that ring, I think if you got one ring, the perception of that pain is entirely different. So.
Yeah. All right, we have emerged near the top 3 here. And so I think before we get into the top 3, we should crack a celebratory beer for everyone who's made the list to this point. Crack a Surly on behalf of these other 22 guys, Judd.
And the great thing is now with 3 guys left, which means that I have given you my top 22 Vikings of all time. I've got a different Surly beer I could pass out to each one of them, right? But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to gather these players around and I'm going to give them a beer that perfectly fits the summer of Surly, which is well underway now. I'm going to give them a Logic Bomb because the Logic Bomb is just an absolutely outstanding, refreshing summer beer from Surly that is fantastic. And they will all enjoy this and they will celebrate. They will revel in their greatness during the summer of Surly. Logic Bomb, buy it now and then show us your cans on Twitter. It is the Surly beer that I am recommending for this weekend. We can get back to Furious soon enough.
Yeah, and speaking of summer, too, one of the big fun summer events in the Twin Cities is the 3M Open, and some of the big bombers that come to town to shoot 20 under par and put on a show for the fans, Dex.
Yeah, the 3M Open, too, is more than just a golf tournament. It's golf that matters, and by attending the 3M Open, you're helping raise money for charity. Not to mention, you'll experience local food trucks, signature cocktails, probably some Surly's involved, family fun side of golf. Join us June 18th to the 24th at TPC Twin Cities to see what it's all about. Get your tickets today at 3mopen.com/tickets. That's 3mopen.com/tickets. You don't have to watch. I played there last summer with our sales team, and you thankfully don't have to watch me hit a bomb off into the fairway, which I don't think I was successful to do at all. You get to watch actual dudes hit just absolute bombs off the fairway. Go check them out. It's the 3M Open from July 18th to the 24th.
Love it. Also, one more shout out here, too, because there's 6 days left as we sit here recording this episode of the Purple Daily Getaway to Miami. We are sending 2 fans down to Miami to see Purple versus Aqua, Teal, in Week 6. We've got the lower level tickets for you. We'll cover the travel, and all you have to do is just show up on the Score North app and enter to win the tickets. So open the Score North app, register, and enter through listener rewards. We will pick a winner at the end of the month. All right, we have emerged into the top 3 greatest Vikings of all time, according to Judd.
All right, and I think the 3 names that I'm about to run through will be to the surprise of no one, but the order might be controversial. All right. At number 3, I'm going to bring him on the show right now. Here he is. In my opinion, the greatest receiver in Vikings history.
Wow.
Randy Moss.
The disrespect here.
17 touchdown receptions to, at that time in 1998, establish a rookie record. Again, I'm telling you, I think the 5 guys that we are talking about today changed the game, and there is no question in my mind. Randy Moss, his emergence with the Vikings and what he did, especially early in his career, for 1,000%, changed how the game of football is played, the perception of the pass game. I think that the league said, oh my God, this is a lot of fun. Let's set up more rules to help the passing game. Randy Moss is 3rd, and in my opinion, he is the greatest receiver in the history of a team that's had a few very good ones.
Yeah, well, so Chris Carter has most of the numbers records with the Vikings because he was amazing and he played for the Vikings for, I think, 12 seasons. Right. Randy Moss only played for the Vikings for, 6 seasons?
And then a month.
98, 99, 6 or 7, if you,
so
if you count
2004.
Yeah.
And then a month in 2010.
And he is still by far second in almost all of these categories. 92 touchdowns behind Chris Carter's 110. Yep. Ahead of Anthony Carter's 52 touchdowns. But I think most importantly, the numbers are what they are. The guy put up ridiculous numbers, but one of the amazing eye test players of all time, where you watched him the first couple weeks of the 1998 regular season, and you were like, come again?
Yeah.
What?
Yes.
What is this?
It was ridiculous.
They're just throwing, that's like Tecmo Bowl. You're just throwing the ball down the field into double coverage, and this guy's just jumping up and catching it. Okay. That's kind of a fun weapon.
Yep.
And they freaking went from it's kind of a mediocre 8 wins, 9 wins, right? Throughout the entire decade. And all of a sudden they add this dude to the team.
Yes.
And they become the greatest offense in NFL history.
It was ridiculous. And he made what I think at the time we considered some pretty good, not great necessarily, but good cornerbacks look stupid. What he was doing made no sense. And it was so much fun. So yes, he's third, and I firmly believe, and I don't even like there were some things he did as a person during his career I definitely did not like, but I don't care about that. He was that good. If you change the game, you get full credit for changing the game.
Yeah, it would be so much fun to see what would his career have looked like if they didn't have the falling out and just feel the need to trade him. Some of it's on him, some of it's on the organization for being kind of a mess in the early 2000s in a lot of ways. Yeah. If they had that franchise quarterback, and they kind of like Dante was kind of it, but I mean like a Tom Brady, a guy that is going to be a 10 to 15, and he had Tom Brady, and look what happened. The guy caught 23 touchdowns in one season, and they went undefeated and had an even more unstoppable offense. So, yeah, what would have happened if they could have found a way to be more stable as a franchise and kept him throughout his entire career? I don't know. Maybe he needed, just based on his personality, maybe he needed the jolt. He needed to kind of bounce around and feel like, okay, now I've got the Patriots as my next proving ground.
And I think when he got the job, Tice's entire goal was to please him with the Randy ratio and things like that. But I think that was the worst possible thing, too. Moss needed somebody like Green was when he got here, who probably provided more stability and discipline, which is why I think Belichick worked. Now, to what you're saying, though, Phil, and this is the most important thing, is everything with him was going to be a shelf life. So, like, when Belichick pawned him off back here, he was like, the guy wants a raise. He's declining. He ain't getting it, right? So, yeah, there would probably have been some natural progression to an end. He's another guy, though. It would have been very interesting if they had seen it through in his rookie year and won a Super Bowl. How are things different here then? Like, that's another great hypothetical. If that team wins a championship,
yes,
does Moss leave here? Does Moss become more content? It would have been really, really interesting to see.
There's so many things off that. Does the franchise just kind of get to a different spot, or would Red McCombs and the way that he went about being a thrifty owner, would Denny Green have been around for another 10 years? I don't know. There's so many what ifs off of that 1998 season. But yeah, Randy Moss, I even feel like this might be disrespectful. I might have put him higher than third on the list.
It might be. That's what makes it so great.
He might wind up on my snub list on Monday when we come back.
I love it.
Snub from the top two. All right.
Yes, put him on there. Number two on my list is another guy who, without a doubt, changed the game mightily starting in 1961. Like Moss, had 2 tours of duty as a Vikings, but in his case came back for a second tour and actually went to 3 Super Bowls. Francis Tarkenton. 1971 National Football League MVP. 1975 Hall of Famer who completely changed the way quarterback play happened. Until him, drop back passers, guys that did what QBs were supposed to do, took instruction. Tarkenton comes in as a draft pick from Georgia and scrambles and makes plays, and he's too small to play, but yet he turns out to be great. I think when he retired after the 1978 season, if I'm not mistaken, he held numerous, if not every, at that time, major passing record in the National Football League. Fran Tarkenton is number 2.
What do you have to say to people that think that Kirk Cousins is the greatest quarterback in Vikings history that didn't watch Fran Tarkenton play?
Yeah, I would say you don't understand what you're talking about. Like, you would have to...
Because people look at his numbers and they're like, oh, they're fine, okay. But, numbers are so different in that era.
Right. I mean, what he did at his... Well, one, at his size, but the ability to scramble, the ability... I mean, he was the early case of so many mobile quarterbacks now. He could make plays with his feet in an era where guys just didn't.
Yeah.
Like now it's not. It's like, oh, this guy might take it up a notch, but we've seen this before, right? Back then, you hadn't seen it before. And Van Brocklin, who I believe in 1960 was the league MVP at quarterback and then jumped into coaching, couldn't stand Fran because he's like, he's not playing the right way. What the hell are you doing? It was so different, though, that if you think that Cousins is better because the stats reflect differently, you don't understand what Tarkenton brought.
Yeah, the mobility. I mean, think about now, like it's almost like if you're not mobile as a quarterback, it almost dings you in the draft. I mean, there was an era for a long time for probably, well, maybe even during the Fran Tarkenton era too, where we need the pocket passer, the guy that can sit back in there and be a general in the pocket. Now it's like if you're only that coming into the NFL, if you're Mac Jones or something, you're up against the 8 ball because half the league is mobile. Yeah. Josh Allen, Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, all these guys are elite athletes. So is it fair to say that Fran Tarkenton was one of the first athletes at that position where you would say, okay, he's got the arm, but he can also outrun almost anyone on the field? There's a couple amazing clips of him just like outrunning, running backwards and around.
And throwing on the run?
Yes.
And throwing there. And again, his coach couldn't stand it. So, like, imagine being drafted by a coach who says you're doing, and a coach who played the position really well and says, you're doing this all wrong, son. Yeah. You're not any good. You can't do that. And you're like, no, I can.
Just for fun here, too, because I think you can't just look at numbers and compare. Well, look at Kirk Cousins' numbers compared to his passer rating. This, you got to compare to the era, and the era was so much more friendly toward defense, and you didn't have these offensive-minded wizards like you have now that are getting receivers open. The rules are different. You could hit receivers going over the middle. So now they have route concepts that go over the middle more often now, right?
Right. So
I just went back on Football Reference, and I did a search for quarterbacks between 1950 and 1982. Mm-hmm. So when football kind of emerged into the passing era at the time anyways, where instead of running the ball 90%, you had quarterbacks actually throwing in the 50s and the 60s. And then all the way to 82, I wanted to do this search before Elway, Marino, Montana got too prominent. And Fran Tarkenton has the 6th best passer rating of that 32-year era, behind Roger Staubach, Len Dawson, Sonny Jurgensen, Ken Anderson, Bart Starr. He's ahead of Dan Fouts, Otto Graham, Johnny Unitas, Ken Stabler, Bob Greasy, Don Meredith, some of these all-time great quarterbacks. Y.A. Tittle from even further back. The guy put up to his era, he was, I mean, think about if we did this exercise right now. So take a 30-year chunk going back to 1990, let's say, from 1990 to 2022. Mm-hmm. Who are the 5 or 6 best quarterbacks? You would say, well, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, probably John Elway, maybe Patrick Mahomes, and then Drew Brees or Aaron Rodgers or Brett Favre or somebody. Take your pick for the 5th or 6th guy. Sure. That's the equivalent of what Fran Tarkenton was compared to the other quarterbacks in his era between 1950 and the early 1980s. Yep. And I think that gets forgotten, or it's just, guys like me and Declan weren't alive to watch him play, and so it's hard to put it into context.
And so from 61, which was his first year, to 76, okay? He missed, games-wise, he missed a game in 2 of those years. So, like, here's an undersized guy who's scrambling, who's getting hit, right? He didn't get hurt until his second to last year, 1977, when he broke his leg against the Bengals at the Met.
Yeah.
So, like, this guy's scrambling around, throwing on the run, getting hit when the rules allowed you to decapitate quarterbacks, and he didn't miss time.
Yeah. I'll give you a couple more,
remarkable.
Too. Just for fun, again, for context here, because you can't compare quarterback stats from that era to this era. You have to compare in era. From 1950 to 1982, Fran Tarkenton had the most yards of any quarterback by 7,000 yards. He had 47,000 yards through the air. Johnny Unitas had 40,000. Touchdown passes, Fran Tarkenton, 342. The next closest was Johnny Unitas, 50 touchdowns behind him at 290.
Yeah.
So any way you slice it, he was one of the 5, maybe even 3 greatest quarterbacks of that generation. And it's another guy that, because he doesn't have a Super Bowl, if Fran Tarkenton had 2 Super Bowls, why do we put Roger Staubach on these lists? Why do we put Terry Bradshaw on these lists? Terry Bradshaw's not as good as Fran Tarkenton. He's not.
Nope.
But he won Super Bowls.
Rings, baby. It's all about the rings.
So, all right.
So Tarkenton.
The greatest Viking of all time, according to Judd.
The greatest Viking of all time is the man who was, in 1971, the MVP of the National Football League. At the time, the first time a defensive player had won that, and he did it from the interior line. Alan Page is the greatest Viking of all time.
Let's give Alan Page a little love here.
Alan Page,
everybody.
again, a game changer. But think about that, you guys. Think about that. 1971, okay? An interior, so like this is before football shows came along to like paint the picture of Aaron Donald's unbelievable. This guy's playing in Minnesota. He's playing outdoors here, interior line, on a line that is considered to be really good. So like everyone gets attention. Eller's great, Marshall's great, Page, Larson. And he stands out enough that he is named the MVP of the entire league. Quarterbacks, running backs, everything. Alan Page. And another guy who, in the vein of Johnny Randall, was not a super, like, big, heavy-set guy. He got pressure. He got to quarterbacks. Page and Tarkenton and Moss, all no question in their own way, changed the game. But I think in a lot of ways what Page did might have been the most impressive given his position, the era, and the attention he still got for it.
And it's funny because he retired 1 year before the NFL started keeping track of sacks officially. So Pro Football Reference actually went back through film study, and it was a multi-year process, and they filled in sack totals for players before 1982. And Alan Page had 148.5 sacks in his career, including in 1976 when he was 31 years old, the second to last year with the Vikings. This was the last Pro Bowl and All-Pro season for him. He had 18 sacks in 14 games. Unofficially, though, because the NFL did not track stats as an official metric in 1976. My favorite Alan Page statistic is from 1970, his fourth year in the league. He recovered 7 fumbles that year. Just every other game, he's just bouncing on a fumble. He finished third in the MVP voting that year, and then he won it, like you said, the next year in 1971. Incredible.
That is ridiculous.
So there you have it. There it is. You can see it on the YouTube channel here. Judd's top 25 Vikings of all time. Randall McDaniel 5, John Randall 4, Randy Moss 3, Fran Tarkenton 2, and Alan Page number 1. Nice job, dude. This is a great
Fun. This was a lot of
experiment
fun
here this week.
Thank you. Controversial, somewhat, but fun. And you know what? I think I'm going to get some pushback like you gave me a little bit, Phil, on Moss. And I don't disagree. Those top 3 names, to me, it's so hard. You could change them any which way and probably not be wrong.
Yeah, you're going to get pushback from fans under the age of 40.
I mean, Moss defines a generation of now aging Vikings fans.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just looking this up too, because I think Pro Football Reference does have, so they put in the unofficial sack totals here. So they have an unofficial leaders list and an official leaders list. So they go back from 1960 to 1982 and they fill in a bunch of these. Okay. And Alan Page is 8th on the all-time sacks list, just ahead of Lawrence Taylor and Michael Strahan.
Wow.
So Bruce Smith, Reggie White, Deacon Jones, Kevin Green, Julius Peppers, Jack Youngblood, Chris Dolman, Alan Page. John Randall is 14th. Carl Eller is 18th. Jim Marshall is 22nd. So the Vikings have 5 of the top 23 sack getters in NFL history as part of their franchise. All of them are staring at on this list, too. All those guys made the top 25. Boom. There you go.
There you go. There you have it.
So start thinking about your snubs. We're going to talk about snubs early next week. Snubs. But great stuff from Judd there, too. We got some people are sending in some fun ideas for the next month, too. A couple people want it. Well, actually, there's an idea that I'll throw out on the Saturday episode of Purple Daily Reads the Comments that I think you guys will get a kick out of it. I think we can take the idea and make like 5 episodes out of it. So nice. Until the Vikings sign J.C. Treader, we're just making up our own stuff here until training camp starts in a month from now.
I'll tell them to do it.
There you have it. Daily Vikings Entertainment. Let us know, who are your top 5 and top 25 Vikings? Tell us in the Purple Daily YouTube comment section.